May the words of my mouth and the meditations of all our hearts be aligned with your love, O God, our strength, our courage, and our freedom. Amen. Happy New Year, everyone.
Happy New Year.
It's great to see you all, and we're still in Christmas. Today's the 12th day of Christmas. 12 Lords of Leaping or something like that. And everybody gets to see a couple of hours of Downton Abbey tonight. I mean, it's a big deal. This morning's passage from Ephesians, that epistle reading appointed for today, about the fact that you and I are recipients of every spiritual blessing, has long been a reference point for me in my own journey of spiritual and religious healing and transformation. It took place in this way. I was at a retreat for clergy in the Diocese of Atlanta as a young priest, and a monk from our Episcopal monastery in Cambridge, Massachusetts, was our retreat leader. As tradition has it, for those kinds of retreats, you can sign up for a one-on-one appointment with the retreat leader during the afternoon. So I did so and met with the retreat leader, and I remember absolutely nothing of what I wanted to talk with him about. Because what I do remember is the end of the conversation when I asked the monk to pray for me. He stood up, came over to my chair, placed his hands on my head, and prayed that God would give me every spiritual blessing. At the same time, I felt so loved and accepted by God, embraced by God's warmth and affection. The whole notion that God would give me every spiritual blessing in the heavens. And at the same time, that I felt so loved and accepted by God, in my head, I thought that what he had just prayed for was theologically and religiously impossible. How could I, someone who was intrinsically such a sinner, be worthy of or receive every spiritual blessing? So I mentioned my cognitive dissonance to the monk, and at that point, my retreat began. At that point is where my spiritual journey became clearer. For he said that this was God's will for me and for every other human being, and that it would be good for me to spend the rest of the day praying the first chapter of Ephesians, the lesson we just heard. It is often the case that you and I have received such a toxic script about ourselves, having to do with human unworthiness, that we miss an essential part of the spiritual and religious life. Let me go at it from a different direction with a different story. When it comes to the topic of blessings and the dynamic of blessing, few people have thought as much about it or written as poetically about the act of blessing than has the late Irish poet John O'Donohue. John O'Donohue wrote a book of blessings and theological reflections on blessings. Before O'Donohue left the Irish Catholic priesthood, when he was a young priest, he visited a contemplative community of sisters in Ireland. He said, an old sister opened the door. Knowing that I was a new priest, she asked for my first blessing. So I stood over this contemplative nun and drew on every resource I knew to invoke the most intimate blessing for her. And as I was completing the blessing, it struck me how ironical this situation was. Here was a contemplative who had spent over 60 years of her life navigating the searing silence, darkness of God, the love of God, the light of God, and yet she was asking a 25-year-old upstart for his blessing. When she stood up, I decided to kneel down and ask her for her blessing. She seemed utterly taken aback. She mumbled something and ran out of the room. She must never have had such a request for her blessing before. This was a woman who practiced a totally contemplative life, and yet the religious system that she and I were in made her feel that she could not bless someone else. And conversely, that same religious system made me think that I could bless anyone. And this experience led me to question who had the authority to bless and who had the power to bless. I think that's an important question for us to begin 2014 with. Who has the power to bless? This question certainly is not to be answered simply by the description of somebody's institutional status or membership. There are deeper questions hidden here. When you bless, what do you bless with? When you bless, where are you blessing from? When you bless another, John O'Donohue says, the first important thing is for you to gather yourself, to reach below your surface mind and personality down to the deeper source within you, namely your soul. Because blessing is from soul to soul. And the key to who you are is your soul. O'Donohue warns us that if we never think of our soul or think of it as some kind of spiritual fantasy, so listen up, something's important about to be said because of the phone ringing. I always know. There are no accidents, right? So O'Donohue warns us that if we never think of our soul, or we never think of our soul as or if we always think of our soul as some kind of spiritual fantasy, then what is going on is we are squandering and not accessing an infinite energy at the heart of our lives. But on the other hand, soulful living, in which we are awakened to our soul and to the soul in other people, we know that we are no longer alone, nor are we at the mercy of our own frailty and limitation. Awakening to your soul, you begin to learn another way of being in the world. The old barriers no longer confine you, the old wounds no longer name you, and the old fears no longer claim you. All of that is still present, but they are all in a weakened state than we earlier thought, because we discover that there is something infinitely stronger inside each one of us and inside every other human being. And that core of infinite energy is the core of the human, the soul, the core self that dovetails into the infinite. So then, the key to blessing, O'Donohue argues, is to acknowledge that regardless of how badly we may think of ourselves or how badly we think of another person, there is a wholesomeness in us that no one has ever been able to damage. There is this inner sanctuary, that place in all of us which has never been touched by abuse or insult or violation. We are more than our biography. O'Donohue, who studied philosophy, quotes Meister Eckhart, the 13th century mystic, who said, "There is a place in the soul that neither time nor flesh nor no created thing can ever touch, and it's the strongest thing in your life." Mike Farrell, our friend who's an actor who was in MASH, and he and John O'Donohue were fast friends, translates it into his language. He says, this inner sanctuary means that there is a zone within your heart where no one has ever got to you, where you are not damaged, where your poise and your sense of balance are impeccable, and where you are absolutely true to yourself. Our friend Archbishop Desmond Tutu calls it the divine goodness that abides alive in every human being, no matter what that person has done. And so, the intention of having friends, the intention of loving others and yourself, the intention of having a prayer life, the intention of having prayerful political activity in your life is to allow your heart to enter and to visit this inner sanctuary where it can regain its confidence, renew its energy, and quicken with critical and creative vision. This is the secret heart of the whole adventure of blessing, both giving blessings to others and receiving blessings from others, no matter what your cultural and institutional status is. When you and I bless someone, we literally call the force of their infinite self into action. My friends, this faith I'm trying to describe this morning has the power to convert, the power to transform, the power to forgive, the power to liberate you to be your true self, the power to discover your true vocation, and the power for you to discern what steps you're going to take every day of your life. Even when you sail off the map of the script that was given to you by your parents, your family, your religion, your philosophy of life, your culture, or your politics. I am feeling this intention so powerfully about our life together this new year of 2014. Because what is at stake and what I'm trying to invoke in this sermon, in our being a community of people here at All Saints and everybody who touches All Saints, is for us to be a community of people who bless and who receive blessing. And this is nothing short of having a new year that is authentically, genuinely, truly new. A new year that has a religion, a theology, a spirituality, a philosophy of life for you and for me and for our faith community as a whole. For us to practice here a religion that is not so constrictive or tight that it turns us into people who do bad things to ourselves and to those we love and to others with whom we share this planet and this universe. As our New Year's Eve poem described, you and I have a choice to either upholster the ruts of life in such a way that there is no risk or adventure or pioneering or newness in our lives. We can live a life of what Desmond Tutu calls safe sameness that leaves us unable to bless or to receive blessings. I'll never forget when my wife Hope and I went to South Africa, when you sent us to South Africa in 1995 to observe Desmond Tutu's first retirement. He's had 3 or 4 since then. And a former member of the apartheid, South African apartheid army in the psychological operations division, told a story about being the best psychological operatives person that South Africa had, and they sent him to do his thing on Archbishop Desmond Tutu in his office. And his job was to so screw with him psychologically that he would be reduced, Desmond Tutu, to blithering idiocy and submission to the apartheid government. And he said, he appealed to my goodness and to my soul with such love that I was the one who left that office changed, not he. Our rabbi in residence, Leonard Bierman, describes this soul, this goodness, this infinite energy inside of us, not in terms of soul, but in terms of having an awakened conscience. Rabbi Bierman says, an awakened conscience is what makes a human being. We have that conscience all the time. The issue is it needs to be awake. And that's what makes a woman or a man more nearly a companion of God. You see, not only do each of us have a soul, does each of us have a soul, the world itself has a soul. And Rabbi Bierman says this world, for all of its cynicism and its suffering, for all of its barbarism and stupidity and anguish, this world and its soul is also a place where change is possible, where love and human will can be transforming. And in this endeavor, there's no guarantee of victory, but there is a choice. One either collaborates with the enemy or becomes one of the resistors. You and I either collaborate with the enemy with whatever is miserable or inhumane, with whatever is unjust, with whatever demeans the life of any human being, even those we call our enemies. Or we can join the resistance and insist on being among those who strive to diminish the store of insult and agony in the world, my friends. Ephesians 1 promises us that if we will access and receive this blessing that is pouring out to us, that we can have wisdom, enlightenment, hope, and power. All of those are ours in 2014. And the choice is ours. And my vision for us as a movement, not as an institution, but as a movement, is that more than ever before, All Saints Church and everybody who touches us and everybody we touch becomes a community of blessing, becomes a community of contemplation becomes a community of resistance, a community of soul.